The banquet hall smelled of polished wood and roasted chicken, laughter echoing off the chandeliers. Margaret stood near the table where her late father's prized photographs once hung, her hands folded neatly in front of her. Suddenly, Charles, her older brother, raised his glass, his voice booming loud enough for the whole room to hear. "She never deserved that car," he sneered, his tone sharp, cruel. The words cut through the chatter like broken glass. Heads turned. Plates paused mid-air. Margaret's chest tightened, the humiliation pressing down like a weight. That car had been her father's last gift, his legacy to her. Now, in front of cousins, neighbors, and old family friends, Charles reduced it to nothing. Her lips trembled, but she stayed silent. The room leaned in, waiting. Would she bow her head in shame, or strike back? The sting of Charles's words echoed in Margaret's chest as the room's laughter slowly resumed, but her mind drifted back years, to a time before insults, before the betrayal. She remembered the small town house where she and Charles grew up. Their father, Harold, worked long hours at the factory, yet every evening he'd sit on the porch with Margaret, teaching her the value of honesty and quiet strength. "Respect," he would say, his voice steady, "isn't something you demand. It's something you earn." Those words became her compass, but Charles never saw it that way. Even as kids, he strutted around with a sense of entitlement. At school, when Margaret came home with straight A's, Charles would roll his eyes. "Books won't buy you a car," he'd mutter. He wanted attention, not wisdom. And when their father finally restored his cherished classic car, a gleaming blue vehicle polished every Saturday, he promised it to Margaret. "You see value in things," Harold had said softly. "This belongs to you when I'm gone." Charles had heard those words too, but his smirk said he never believed them. He was sure that as the eldest son, everything would eventually land in his lap. The years passed, and Margaret quietly built her own path. While Charles bounced from job to job, spending weekends bragging at bars, Margaret worked tirelessly, her focus always steady. Yet she never rubbed it in. Respect, she remembered, wasn't about showing off, but when their father passed, the shift was immediate. The will had been clear, the car was hers. Still, Charles sneered. He convinced their mother to back him, whispering that Margaret wouldn't even know how to handle it. Within weeks, the car was gone, sold behind her back to fund his latest scheme. The betrayal had been a knife to the chest. Margaret hadn't fought then. She left quietly, choosing dignity over shouting. She walked away with nothing but her father's words echoing in her heart, and now, here she was, standing in that banquet hall, humiliated in front of family, her inheritance mocked like it had never mattered. The crowd glanced at her, waiting. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was fuel. Because what no one in that room knew was that Margaret had spent her years away building something powerful, something Charles could never imagine. She lifted her eyes, meeting his smirk with a calm, unreadable gaze. For the first time, he looked uneasy. The banquet hall buzzed again, forks clinking against plates, but Charles wasn't finished. He thrived on attention, and tonight, Margaret was his target. He leaned back in his chair, voice loud enough to hush nearby tables. "You all know why Dad gave her that car, right?" His grin widened, dripping with arrogance. Pity. He felt sorry for her. Always the quiet little girl, too weak to stand on her own. A ripple of laughter circled the room. Margaret felt the sting, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she straightened her shoulders, her calmness unsettling in contrast to Charles's cruelty. "Susan, their cousin, whispered nervously, "Margaret, are you okay?" She turned her head slowly, her eyes steady, and gave a faint smile. "I'm fine." Her tone was calm, but her silence carried a weight that made Susan's words die in her throat. Charles wasn't done. He stood, glass in hand, towering over the table. "She walked away years ago with nothing. And guess what? She came back with nothing. Still the same Margaret. Invisible. Forgettable." The room fell into a hush. Even the band playing soft jazz in the corner quieted as if sensing the tension. All eyes darted toward Margaret. Some looked embarrassed for her, others curious. Margaret inhaled slowly, the faint scent of roasted coffee from the dessert table grounding her. She set her fork down carefully, the clink echoing louder than expected in the silence. She met Charles's gaze, but said nothing. Her calm unnerved him. His smirk faltered, just slightly. "Say something, Margaret," he pushed, his voice sharper now, desperate for her to break. She leaned forward just enough for him to see the flicker in her eyes, a flicker that whispered she wasn't the same sister he once mocked. The corners of her lips curled upward, not into a smile, but into a quiet acknowledgement of something he couldn't yet understand. Whispers spread around the table. Betty, an elderly aunt, adjusted her glasses, murmuring, "There's something different about her." Charles caught it too. His laugh came forced this time, brittle and hollow. He tried to cover his unease with another jab. Unless, of course, she's hiding something. The room tilted toward Margaret, waiting for her to deny it, to shrink. But she didn't. Instead, she stood. Slowly, deliberately. Her chair scraped against the polished floor, the sound sharp as a blade. The crowd collectively held its breath. Charles froze, his glass trembling ever so slightly in his hand. The hall went silent as Margaret rose to her full height. The clatter of silverware stopped, conversations died, even the band in the corner lowered their instruments. All eyes fixed on her, her calm voice carried across the room. "You sold what was mine, Charles. But you didn't sell me." Charles scoffed, though his voice wavered. Big words. Still nothing to show for them. Margaret took a slow breath, then reached into her bag. She unfolded a crisp document, the gold-embossed seal gleaming under the chandeliers. Gasps echoed as the front row leaned forward. "I didn't come back with nothing," she said, her tone steady. "While you were wasting what father left us, I was serving this country. Years of discipline. Years of sacrifice. And now." She turned the paper outward, the audience craning to see. It was a military commission, signed and stamped. "I stand here not as your sister, but as Captain Margaret Hayes of the United States Army." The words hit like thunder. A hush swept through the room. Then came the audible gasp, the shuffle of chairs, the murmur of astonishment. Betty clutched her pearls, whispering, "Captain, my goodness." Margaret's uniform jacket, folded neatly over her arm, now glimmered with its insignia. She slid it on with measured grace, each button a blow to Charles's pride. The medals across her chest caught the light, sparking whispers from every corner. Charles's face drained of color. His smug grin melted into something hollow. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His hand shook, glass trembling until a drop of wine spilled down his cuff. "I earned respect through service, sacrifice, and honor," Margaret continued, her voice firm but never raised. "Not through taking what didn't belong to me." The room broke into applause. Chairs scraped as family members stood, some clapping, others nodding with tears in their eyes. Aunts, uncles, even distant cousins who once dismissed her now looked at her without. Margaret's gaze never left Charles. She didn't gloat, didn't raise her chin. She simply let the silence hang heavy between them, her calm composure louder than any insult. Charles's lips parted, his voice cracking. You're a captain," but no one was looking at him anymore. The spotlight was fixed firmly on her. Charles stood frozen, the wine glass slipping from his hand and shattering against the polished floor. The sharp crack echoed through the silent hall, and heads turned toward him with disapproval. For years he had strutted around this family as if entitlement made him worthy. Now, under the glow of chandeliers, he looked small, cornered, trembling, exposed. Margaret didn't need to raise her voice. Her presence was louder than his insults had ever been. She adjusted her uniform jacket, the medals catching the light once more. Every clap, every nod from the crowd cut deeper into Charles than any sharp word could. "Dad trusted me because I respected his legacy," Margaret said evenly, her tone calm but commanding. "Respect isn't claimed. It's earned." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Susan, who had once pitied Margaret, now smiled with pride. Betty dabbed her eyes with a napkin, whispering, "Harold would be proud." Charles tried to salvage his pride. "It was just a car," he stammered, but the crowd erupted with scoffs. An uncle shook his head. "No, Charles. It was more than that. It was about honor." Humiliation flushed his cheeks red. He stumbled back into his chair, avoiding eye contact as whispers grew louder. The same relatives who once laughed at his jabs now turned away from him, ashamed to have ever cheered his cruelty. Margaret, on the other hand, didn't gloat. She didn't linger to rub in her victory. She simply lifted her chin, her calm gaze sweeping the room before landing briefly on her brother. He looked broken, his arrogance shattered under the weight of her truth. Without another word, she turned toward the exit. The soft click of her heels on the hardwood floor was the only sound in the hall, each step carrying dignity, each stride a reminder of the strength she had quietly built. As she reached the doorway, she paused. The room leaned in. Margaret turned her head slightly, her voice gentle yet piercing enough to be remembered. "Never mistake silence for weakness." The hall remained still as she walked into the night air, the cool breeze meeting her face. Behind her, the applause rose again, echoing into the dark, leaving Charles to drown in the weight of his own disgrace. Moral: respect is earned, not inherited.